Welcome to the next half hour of Cambridge Inside Out. I'm still Robert Winters.
And I'm still Craig, and she is still not here, so we're left with Harvey.
We do have it on good authority. Susana may actually arrive here shortly, but not just yet. So I don't want to go on for the whole half hour about school-related things, but two little things. One is that you have been involved as a warm body, as you belittle yourself.
Yes, as a warm body.
Is it a coach for the high school debate?
Well, what happened is my son, my oldest son, 17, he's on the debate team.
Which is your oldest son?
Robbie.
Robbie.
Excellent name. He's named after my dad, by the way, who goes by Bob. So Robbie was on the debate team last year and the year before, and Hope and I kept asking him about the debate team, and he would tell us nothing about it.
Really?
It's run by a couple of Harvard students. We didn't know anything. So this year they wanted to go to the Bronx for a debate tournament. And by the way, it's a speech and debate team. And the speech stuff is super exciting, but Robbie does the debate. And the high school said, we can't let you just go to the Bronx on your own or with a college kid that we don't know. You need to find someone else. So Robbie says, Dad, what are you doing this weekend? Can you take us to the Bronx?
And that's how it started?
And that's how it started. Turns out that when you show up as a debate team, you need one adult for every 2 debate teams to be a judge. So not only did I show up at the Bronx, but I had to judge all these debates, these policy debates, public forum debates. And I'd never done that before, but now they need me when I go places. When they go places, I need to go because they need a judge. And so this weekend we're going to Chicago for the National Catholic Forensics League. These are called forensics leagues, kind of like CSI.
Really?
National Catholic Forensics League tournament. And the policy debate is resolved that the minimum wage is something that makes the U.S. economy stronger. And it's amazing. The policy questions, you see these 16, 15, 17-year-old kids researching nuclear proliferation, researching UN efforts in the Sahel region of Africa, researching the effects of the minimum wage, researching voters' rights laws. Just, it's astounding. It's truly amazing.
I'm going to actually keep an eye out if they're sort of strutting this stuff here locally.
Well, they will be back. They did
see
it next year. Come to the Harvard event in February.
I will do it.
And see the speech as well. I want to get the speech more part of our speech and debate team.
Yeah.
Because everything I read is you can reach people with speech and debate, which are academic. There are 3 types of sports, right? There are competitive sports, there are contact sports, and there are combat sports, right? And speech and debate is a combat sport. It's incredibly intense.
Really?
Oh yeah, God, it's intense. So come, it's a blast.
No, I'm going to definitely keep an eye out for it. Now, another thing that I knew about, I'm going to ask you about here too, is that you, in addition to being a city councilor, and what's your field of law, by the way?
I don't have one. I've never practiced a day
in my life.
You've
never practiced law? Okay.
No.
But
I studied mostly environmental law, but I don't have a said specialty.
Oh, I see. But you're also an author.
I am. I co-authored.
And I don't just mean the copious notes you're always taking at the city council meetings.
I have a stack about.
And you're very old school.
Probably this high.
And let me tell you, and he uses those old style composition type notebooks.
Yeah, I got a basement full of them.
Really?
Well, they're all full now. But it keeps me focused. Otherwise, what I wind up doing is I wind up daydreaming, or if my computer's in front of me, I wind up doing stuff on that.
No, actually, I have always felt that note-taking is really an excellent way to sort of put a little hook on something so that it stays with you.
Absolutely.
And even today when kids are having sort of fancy technological ways of doing things in classrooms, I'm thinking, if they're not taking notes, there's a good chance they're not going to remember some of this.
Someone told me the other day, and I don't know where the study came from, but it might have been MIT kids, but a survey of students indicated they wanted more paper.
Yeah, I think I saw something as well. But now, as I was sort of
So I co-authored an environmental handbook.
Okay.
The environmental handbook, that's the title.
All right.
That was supposed to launch me somewhere, but it didn't really. But it was an interesting thing to do. It's pretty boring. And then I was going to be you should be sitting here next to a best-selling author.
All right.
Because that was my plan.
Okay.
So I wrote a novel.
All right.
Called Full Dress Out, which you can get on Amazon.
What's the title again?
It's called Full Dress Out, which is the...
Full Dress Out?
Full Dress Out, DRESSOUT.
Okay.
And full dress out is the sort of slang term for when you dress up in level A response gear with the positive air pressure and the
Okay.
heavy suit and, you know, all that stuff. And it's an environmental thriller, and it's a really, really good environmental thriller, and it should have been a bestseller, but it wasn't.
Well, you're working it now. Is it stopped there, or are you going to be writing your next great novel?
It turns out I wrote another one, but I couldn't get people to read that, so it's still in the draft stage.
All right.
And it takes a lot of work to write a novel.
I'm
It takes
sure
a
it
huge
does.
amount of work, and I have a lot more novels in my mind, but finding the time to write them is something that I haven't been able to do. It's an amazing amount of work. When you see people that are writers, they're getting up at 5 in the morning and they're writing until 6:30, 6 days a week, and then on Sunday they're writing for 4 hours or something
Right.
like that. It's incredible. It's what they do, and I have not done it.
Well, stick to it.
Well, if you-
I find it kind of an interesting.
You go on,
Feature.
if you go online, you can actually, this is kind of sad, you can buy used copies of my book for like $6 or something on
Yeah.
Amazon. And then some of them will say with personal inscription inside.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, I gave a book to someone as a Christmas present, some long lost friend or whatever, and they look at it and say, you know what, screw this guy. And they throw it on eBay for $3.
No, actually, I have friends, old friends from New York who've written poetry books and whatever, and that's to me, it's a wonderful thing to actually be able to read a book written by somebody you know.
Well, you can get it for $3 plus shipping or something like that.
I will-
It's really worth it. Not to sell my own stuff. It's as good a book as you will ever read.
Okay.
I'll tell you what. If it's not, I will buy it back from you plus shipping.
$3. There we go.
Whatever it is you spend. I'm very confident that when you read it, you'll say this is a really, really good book. But it's interesting because, given it is truly a really, really, really good book, it went nowhere. I've heard bands that are really, 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 really good, and they go nowhere. And you know, you
Okay.
see paintings. So there's lots of, and this is a good
a lot
life
of good
lesson.
stuff that is
There's
not
a lot
always
of
most
really good stuff in the world, and the fact that it doesn't become financially successful. You don't write a book because you want to make money. You write a book because you want to write a book. That's what I did.
Absolutely right. One of the things I thought I might do for this last half hour is just sort of trot through some particular issues, shall we say? that
Okay,
have been
we can trot.
This is one of those things.
We can trot through them or race through them. Or,
Either way, one of the things we often do during a municipal election campaign, where we sort of, talk about what are the issues you care about here, but, I don't think nearly enough attention is given to sort of how people think about these things after they're actually elected, and in sort of in an ongoing way. So I think, let's see, what are some of the sort of the big things that have been sort of afoot these days? There's, we won't have to dwell on it for very long, but certainly there was some of the things going down in East Cambridge, like what the future for the Sullivan Courthouse is, right?
yeah.
And I don't, I won't put you on the spot.
No,
as to
that
this
you
thing,
can. I think the Sullivan Courthouse illustrates one of the bigger issues that we have as a city, which is we're a super popular place to be. We're 6.2 square miles. We have lots of really cool stuff. People want to do things here. And we've made, to some extent, an unwritten pact with the world that says, we will do this.
Right.
We will be the science place, life science place for the world, or at least one of them.
But that was
And-
actually a very deliberate
Right.
strategy.
So we have sort of made that promise, and that someone looks at the courthouse and says, I can do this, or that MIT looks at its land and says, would you please let us do that, doesn't really come as a surprise. The question I think we need to do a better job answering is saying, what does this promise mean to us? So how can we get these people here without their cars? Now, I don't own a car, so I'm not the guy to really talk about car stuff, but I hate getting hit by cars.
Right.
And I hate getting honked at by cars. And I think we need to, not just in Cambridge, we need to have a very different dialogue about what it means to get around. And the new term is urban mobility.
Right.
It's probably not a reasonable thing to expect to get in your car by yourself anywhere in Cambridge at 8 o'clock in the morning and think that you're going to get someplace else in Cambridge without encountering traffic.
Right. I think it's sort of a general principle in life, physics, biology, and otherwise too, is no matter what the conditions are, people find ways to adapt to it. It's just sort of,
Yes,
You know?
though the adaptation can simply be to spend more time in your car, which
Well,
can be really, really frustrating.
Listen, if it was a somewhat drizzly morning or something, I might be tempted to like drive down to MIT from my house, which is ridiculous. But there would be no place for me to park, so I wouldn't even consider it anymore. So I will bicycle, rain, snow, sleet, hail, whatever, and I'm fine.
And you can do that, but to the Sullivan Courthouse, for example, if you're living in Billerica, you're not
Not
going
an
to
issue.
bicycle.
Yeah,
The question
absolutely.
is, how do you get to the Sullivan Courthouse if you live in Billerica?
Right.
And I don't have an answer for that. I think it's a fair question. I don't think that we can let our development be absolutely governed by people that want to drive their own car by themselves wherever it is that they're going to go, whenever it is they want to go there, and expect to get no traffic. I'm overstating that case.
Sure.
But we only have so much space in the city. And what I say is we're like a tree. We've chosen the tree path. We either grow or we die.
Right.
And we would like to grow smart, and it's a good idea to have a better knowledge of what it is this growth is going to look like. Who's living in these micro units? Who's living in the multi-bedroom units? How long are they
Personally,
staying?
micro units are these things that are what, like 400 square foot? little-
350 to 5, I think, is
real
the
tiny
the
little
definition.
apartments. They once would have called them efficiencies or studios
Right.
or something. Now they say micro housing. I always think of it as sort of like a short-term option for somebody, but you probably wouldn't want to live there very long, unless you're. But then again, people in New York City, they'll live in a closet because they're spending their whole time out in the
They're
street. Anyway.
probably not raising kids.
They're not raising kids.
And
That's right.
my guess, and it's a guess, but it's supported by what I've seen and been told, is we will have people living in small places until their kids get to be 5 or 7, and then they think, well, it's tight, we're paying a lot of money, we're uncomfortable
move.
with the school system. It's sort of a 3 things all at once, and they move to Lexington or Belmont or.
But people do that now anyway.
Sure.
People do, I mean, I've been in my house for like 35 years, but I think that's pretty atypical these days. People.
Well, to get back to the idea of planning, I think that is knowledge that we could have. And what we would do with that knowledge, I don't know, but it would be interesting to have a much better idea of who is staying, who is going, where are they going to, why are they going. We don't want to spend so much time collecting knowledge that we can't do anything with what we collect. But I think it's useful to have micro units. I think they provide a need. I think that it's useful to have bigger units. They provide a need. I don't think it's useful to think that everyone who wants to live in Cambridge will be able to afford it to live in Cambridge.
Right.
I don't think that's a healthy thing to put out there as part of the discussion. I also don't think it's healthy to look at Cambridge by itself when it comes to any of these issues. We have traffic issues that are regional. We have housing issues that are regional. We have employment issues that are regional. We have environmental issues that are regional. And this whole home rule thing, which the Northeast is really
You mean talk
peculiar
about,
fuel.
talk about feudal. New
Yeah,
England.
something
Feudal-
like that,
feudal New
right? So,
England, right?
we're 6.2 square miles and we dwarf Chelsea.
Right.
I think they're 1.6 or something like that. But they also have their town leader and they have their police
No,
commissioner.
I agree with you completely. Something when people get into discussions about housing and transportation, to actually discuss that in a city by city way is a little bit ridiculous. One of the things I said recently was that one of the best things we could do for affordability of housing in Cambridge is to hope that over in Union Square, Somerville, that thousands of housing units are built, because people say, well, I could pay $1 zillion for that Cambridge
and
place.
Somerville is a very popular
It's
place to be right now.
It's a great place, actually.
And, Medford is a
Absolutely great
popular
place.
place to be. And if you lived, my son and some friends and I just did the 5-borough ride in New York.
I used to do those in the early days.
This is my 5th time, I think.
Yeah.
And it's 42 miles. You bike from the Battery up through Central Park, across the Bronx,
Yep.
little tiny corner of the Bronx.
Yep.
A lot of room in Queens, a lot of room in Manhattan, a lot
And
of
then the
room
spectacular
in Queens.
descent coming
in-
down the Verrazano
yes,
Bridge.
onto Staten Island.
Scary
But-
fast riding.
But if we were New York, if this were New York, Boston would be the Manhattan, and we would be one of the inner boroughs.
Yep.
And it would all be one big city with one person in charge. Chicago the same way. So I was listening to the mayor of Chicago speak at MIT maybe 2 months ago, and he was explaining how they did this with the buses and this was something else. And you can do that when you have the city that is the city for the region.
Right.
Like Chicago and New York can set the pace of what they're doing. Cambridge can't. Even Boston can't. Boston's,
Right.
I think, definitely the center of gravity around here, but it can't just make up its own mind about some sort of development issue and assume it's going to work without the rest of us tagging
Actually,
along.
I think the way Boston is cobbled together, even Boston can't make up its own mind about its own neighborhoods. You know, it's like, hey, this is JP. Who are you, from Dorchester? What do you know? I don't,
And
I don't have to
people,
listen to you.
when you think about Boston, a lot of us think sort of Back Bay and downtown.
It's like it's
and-
still
and
like
maybe
separate cities in many ways.
You go over into Roxbury or Dorchester or Roslindale or Hyde Park.
Yeah,
Some of them are as suburban or more so than we are.
absolutely true. You go out West Roxbury, it's absolutely suburban. You know, it's really true. So, one other item that's sort of kind of a flashpoint lately is some of the new housing that's been being constructed and being proposed along New Street, out across the street from
Right.
Downey Park.
Right.
I think it's a neighborhood association has sort of been spawned by this now, and it's sort of a
Spawned by that, but also by what's going up on the other side of Fresh Pond Parkway, in the quadrangle, in the triangle there.
oh, I didn't know they were involving themselves in that as well.
They may not be involving themselves as directly, but I think that when you look at what's going up there, and you look at New Street, if you look at the zoning map, you can see that they're not connected. And in fact, the New
Right.
Street projects are not part of the Alewife Overlay District. So when we rezoned the Alewife area 6 years ago, we did not rezone New Street. And in fact, if New Street were tucked into the zone, I think it's AU6,
Right.
which is the Fresh Pond Mall part, it would be infinitely more developable than what's there. But you don't know that when you look at the property. When you look at the property, you assume that New Street and Fresh Pond and that whole area is kind of one big chunk,
You know,
regardless of what the zoning says.
the whole New Street thing kind of just sort of snuck up on me, because to me, I've always just thought of it as that road you took to go into Danahy or to take the back road into the cinema, whatever. And you know, and there was some sort of you went there to check out some windows. Was it JD Sash or
Yep,
something?
and there's all sorts of sort of
yeah, there are a few little
little
hideaway places tucked in and around
you can
there.
look at fireplaces. You can
Exactly. I always thought of it as just sort of a miscellaneous road. I never thought of it as a residential street, but it's becoming.
nor did I. But that's our zoning code, though.
Yeah,
and
no.
our zoning code, and we've seen it again and again and again at the planning board, where someone says, we want to do this, and because we give a preference, I'm talking about the BAs, the BA2s,
Right.
along the railroad tracks, because we give a preference to residential, it becomes denser than it would be
Right.
if you drop that preference and just said, here's your FAR, you can take it in residential, you can take it in
So
commercial.
you're talking about that kind of incentive zoning,
Right,
where
so
they
the
said
incentive to
move it
push
away from
stuff
commercial
towards residential, that's been outdated for a decade maybe, or 5 years. It's been outdated for a long time, and I keep telling the planning board, give us something that changes this. I don't know enough about zoning and planning and so forth to come up with the right words, but by the time you've seen this argument 6, 7, however many times they've seen it, they got to realize there's a trend here.
Well, you know, I think there was a time maybe 15 years ago, if you made the case along one of the railroad corridors that you need to give a little bit of an incentive, otherwise it'll just continue to be put back to some other commercial use. I think the economics since then has thoroughly changed.
Absolutely.
Now everybody's, the money is in building the housing, it seems to me.
Absolutely.
Or unless
And-
you're down around Kendall where there's some big high demand for more space for, startups.
Well, and we're getting
and
some
whatever.
lab space out in Alewife, one could have the discussion that we want this amount of housing on these lots, and so the FAR and so forth is appropriate for housing. But that should be its separate discussion rather than we want to give an incentive to keep this from being commercial.
Now, would it be adequate just to basically put in a zoning petition tomorrow that says, let's simply remove that incentive so that you build whatever, we're not going to give you a bonus?
I don't know. I think it could be. We did something similar to that on North Mass Ave where we removed the residential bonus because what we're getting a lot of condos,
Right.
which are fine, except that at some point you've taken out the little pieces of commercial that
Which is
make a
one of-
neighborhood a neighborhood.
And that is one of the great things about North Mass Ave, is it has all these little shops and things.
It's got a lot, and if you talk to the
Yeah.
owners, some of them will say that they're struggling, and some have been there forever, and I don't understand enough about retail to say what's going on. The future of retail, actually the future of many things, is different in a way that I think you and I might have trouble understanding. So when we were campaigning, all of us would go walk up doorstep after doorstep after doorstep, and you start seeing packages of Pampers and
That's what retail, even my upstairs tenants, they get everything, shows up in the
the
mailbox.
stuff that is not fun to shop for is getting delivered.
Yeah.
They talk about delivering it by drones. Right now it's getting delivered by people.
Right.
But you get boxes of a month's worth of toilet paper and toothbrushes and
I think the worst horror story I heard was of people actually going into retail outlets in places like Central Square, checking out products, and then whipping out their iPhone and then ordering it online to be delivered from someplace else, so that the retail place was nothing but the showroom and they got nothing out of it.
that's the future of retail, though, in some ways. So if you're looking at what does the future of North Mass Ave or of Central Square look like, I think we have to keep in mind that technology has changed the way we can do many things. So we can build houses in New Hampshire and truck them down and stick them on steel pilings on New Street, and boom, we have a 40-unit apartment building almost overnight. We can build apartments and have people buy them, live in Nova Scotia or wherever they live, and manage them through Airbnb as investment properties.
Right.
That wasn't possible 20 years ago. So
I wish there was some way, right now there's like a little incentive, like with your tax bill, with a residential exemption, so you get some of the value of your house taken off is supposedly
$220,000.
Yeah, something like that. And I think the theory was that somehow we're sort of rewarding home ownership in some level. But yeah, I've heard some things today. Someone made an argument that when you build a bunch of new housing complex, then some investor from China or whomever just goes in there, thinks of it as a great housing investment, snaps up 20 condos, and then manages them, which seems to defeat the whole purpose then. So I wish there was a better way to sort of reward actual
They're
homeownership.
parking their money. It's a
I know that
good
it's
investment,
right
and
now-
people say repeatedly, we want more housing, we want more housing, we want more housing. Difficult to get more housing without building it,
Yeah.
but we don't know that what we're building is giving us the housing that we want.
I think it's probably like unconstitutional to require, sort of residency in the things you're only allowed to own X number, but you have to live in one of them. or
And
something.
people, we have a two-family, my wife and I, so
Yeah.
we rent out the bottom floor. Lots of people in
Multi-family homes.
Cambridge.
I own a triple decker. Honestly, a 3-family house for me was my route to affordable housing.
Right.
That's how it was accomplished.
That's how you managed to pay.
That's why triple deckers were invented, was to create affordable housing for the owner and a few tenants.
And what we see now is we will build stuff, and then Microsoft or Google or Amazon or whoever will say, we're going to buy 6 of those condos in 303 Third. I'm making
Yeah.
the names up,
I
but
know, I
someplace like that. And we're going to, rather than put our people in extended stay hotels, we're going to put them in these condo units.
Yep.
We're going to have them professionally cleaned and so forth.
And the property will hold its value, and in fact, they'll probably end up making money.
And that gives you a different community
Yeah.
than if you said, we're all going to live here. But even if Craig Kelley buys it, then Craig Kelley says, well, I don't really want to live here anymore. I'm going to move someplace else. I can rent that out.
Yeah.
And what we've found in East Cambridge especially is that people will say, this is our plan. Our model is to have it be owner-occupied, and then it changes,
Yeah.
and it becomes
You
rental.
Can't, you
and
can't enforce it.
we've
Yeah.
been told we can't enforce that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's a shame, and I wish there was some secret way to kind of find a way to sort of reward actual occupancy by the owners.
I don't know what
I
that
have no
would be.
idea.
But I think part of it is looking at housing as a regional thing.
Yeah.
So that someone's living in Somerville rather than Cambridge. It's a problem if you say you want to live in Cambridge, but if you look at it regionally, there are many people in Somerville who live closer to me than many people in Cambridge.
No,
I'm a half mile from the Somerville border, so lots of Somerville is very close to
and
me.
I'm one long block from Inman Square. In fact, if somebody wanted to go to a really nice park near me, one of the closer ones is just over into Somerville.
And if someone in Somerville wanted to go to a really cool
We
library,
won't let them.
they would go to they'd go to our main library. So,
Stop them at the gates.
well, we can in some ways, but a lot of this stuff
don't
is
want
just
to.
so regional in nature that we're really, when we
No,
start thinking about who's the New Street, you start talking about New Street.
Yeah.
You know, that is not, I don't think, what we want Cambridge to look like. If you go
No,
down
no, I agree.
Fawcett Street on the other side,
Yeah.
and you know, I have told people I would vote for a moratorium. I didn't vote for the zoning way back when, precisely because I thought it would be overly car dependent.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. We're creating these buildings that look like they are in the outskirts of DC, you know, those office complexes that,
Yeah.
sorry, not the apartment complexes that pop up in the cornfields.
Yep.
And you know, who's going to look at those in 20 years and say, boy, this is a cool place?
No,
It just, whereas I think Kendall's different. If you go down to Kendall and you have a cup of coffee or a beer or whatever, it's got a different sense, I think, of scale, because you often can see long distances somehow. The buildings are tall and the buildings are big and there are a lot of
Yeah.
cars, but you see a long ways in different directions. You go down Fawcett Street and you say, what in God's name are we doing here?
you're in the Matrix.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah. No, I agree. I have to say I absolutely agree with that. So, anyway, we only got another minute. See, time flies.
It
when you
does.
do this
Well,
show,
so
yeah.
I'm going from here. There's a Cambridge School art show, I think, for the Haggerty School or the Cambridge, one of the schools, above the old organic furniture place.
Oh, down in Cambridgeport?
Yeah, so I'm going to scoot over there and take a look at it.
All right.
So timing's perfect for me.
Oh,
So what else do we have? We've got publicly financed, thumbs down on publicly financed elections,
right.
change from Cincinnati to fractional. You know, the recount was awful.
It was ridiculous and overpriced, and honestly, I consider it just unforgivable that it wasn't canceled.
I think
after
you
the
and
first
I,
round.
you and I share those thoughts. Me perhaps a little more viscerally than you.
Absolutely,
Um,
absolutely.
School building, you know, we're stuck with the school building costs. We have to rebuild these
stuck.
schools.
Anyway, we got 7 seconds.
All right. Well, thank you very
Nice
much. I
having you on,
enjoyed it,
Craig.
Harvey. A pleasure. I'll come back
See you
sometime when
next week on
Susana's here.
Cambridge Inside Out.
All right. Well, this was fun.